the No Limit Selling Podcast, where mindset meets sales and leadership. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the No Limit Selling Podcast. Today we have Joel Stevenson here. He's the head honcho at Yesware. And you got to love that name, man. It's like Yesware. Who can say no to that? Welcome to the program.
Yeah, it's better. Being Yesware is better than being nowhere.
That be true. That will boom.
Yeah.
So, email, how old is email as we know it?
I remember using a Unix-based Pine client back in the 90s when I was in college, and I think it was around a while before that. So I don't know. We got to be at least 35 years, something like that.
Yeah, and what's interesting is for a lot of times that's been the glue that holds people together is email. And then now there's like an explosion of email, and I'm getting offers for all kinds of pills that I probably need, but I'm too scared to get, as well as legitimate business stuff. So in this landscape, how does Yesware fit in and be relevant and be useful and not be seen as something that'll be lost in the noise?
Yeah, well, tools like Yesware, there are many such tools on the market today. I sometimes say that they can be used for good or evil. And, you can relentlessly spam with Yesware. It's certainly possible to do. It's harder to do it with Yesware than with some other tools, but you can definitely do it. Part of what we're really trying to do is fundamentally save people time. So, like, if you were to think about in some sense, the hierarchy of sales productivity, the first thing you want to do is you don't want to waste time doing things over and over again that you could just automate.
Yes.
The second thing you want to do is you want to get some information about what's happening and then try to use that information to your benefit. And then the third thing, if you're part of a team or a group, you want to share that knowledge with others so others can benefit. So ideally what you're using Yesware for is you're using it to, maybe if you have a similar email that you're sending out, you might have a template for that. But then, typically we advise that people create the space for some personalization as part of that. And so you're not just blasting, the old mail merge out, but you're actually taking some time to make sure that that message is specifically relevant to the recipient. And the bar for what it takes to be personalized and I think interesting to people keeps going up, and it's getting even harder now with the large language models, which make it a little bit easier to make it seem like you know something about a person when you maybe really don't. And so what we're really trying to do is create space for that. And so hopefully the time that you save by not syncing things into Salesforce or redoing things that you could do in an automated way, you're using for personalization, and then to do the core sales activities like preparing well for a call, making sure you're asking good questions, doing good follow-up, all that type of stuff.
I was listening to an interview with the head honcho at ChatGPT. And what was interesting was he was talking about, when they first started doing this, that they really thought that what they're going to do is take the rudimentary jobs first will be taken by AI, then the mid-tier, which would be accounting, stuff like that, and then finally the highly creative stuff at the top. And he said, what we're finding out is totally the opposite. We're taking the super creative jobs first, and then we're going to go for the middle, and then we're going to go for the driving a truck or operating machinery is going to be the toughest. So they had a sense of what reality was going to be like, and then reality hit. So for you guys, when you first launched Yesware, what was your hypothesis, and has that changed in some way as you've actually, met the public and clients? And so how's it evolved from where you thought it would be to where it is now?
Yeah, well, the original thesis of Yesware, this goes way back, and even before I wasn't the original founder of the company, so this predates me. But the original thesis was there was not software that was specifically built for salespeople. There was a lot of software that salespeople used, and we sometimes joke that it's called Salesforce because you have to force salespeople to use it. But the original selling thesis of CRM was really about, hey, what happens? Like, I remember we used to do this. Like, well, what happens if the person walks away with a Rolodex? Like, you're screwed. Like, so you want to
Right.
have all that information in house. As a as a sales management team, you need to understand what's in the forecast, what's going to close, what's not going to close. It was never meant to make reps better. It was
Right.
really meant to protect information and to provide visibility to senior management about what's going on with a company. And so, like, nobody ever sat down and said, "Oh, we're going to make reps more productive. We're going to give them CRM." It's like, no, we're going to, control them and get their information better via CRM. So the idea behind Yesware was like, well, what would it look like to create software that just actually made a rep's life better, and made sellers just simply more effective and enjoy their job more? So we started the original. I think the very original app was actually like a keyboard for a mobile phone. The founders had come from more the mobile space,
Mm.
to try. You could add little templates, if you're trying to type out an email on your mobile phone. But ultimately, we ended up landing on taking a concept from marketing automation, which was, who's opening your emails and what sort of analytics are you getting out of that, and adapting it to a sales use case where as soon as somebody opens the email, you get a notification. Now, I know a lot of people do that now, but 10 years, 12 years ago, when I think we first came out with that, and like that was kind of groundbreaking. And so all of a sudden, for the first time, reps could understand who was interacting with their content, and then they could choose to immediately engage with that person when was sort of strike while the iron is hot, if
Mm.
you will. And so that was really the original innovation. And how it's evolved over time is the company grew through a freemium model. So we had a lot of individuals that used it, and then eventually they started to get adopted by teams inside of companies. And so it's grown from a tool that was really just kind of almost a rogue tool inside of organizations that sales reps were adopting by themselves, and it's become a tool that is used by some very large publicly traded companies, and we've had quite a few that it started with us in the early days all the way up through being public companies. So we've had a lot of team, security, all that type of stuff that bigger companies might want. So we serve both of those constituencies today.
So, as you were looking at why did they bring you in, Joel? Like, what was going on? It was like for them to grow more. Like, uh, what made them ask you to come, and what attracted you to come join the company?
Yeah, I was at before I was at Yesware, I was at Wayfair for
Mm.
about 7 years, and the last thing that I did there was I grew our we had a B2B organization inside the company. It sold to interior designers and builders. So we were adopting more of a traditional sales approach versus the vast majority of Wayfair revenue was strictly B2C e-commerce
Right.
stuff. And so we grew that. We had about, I think, 500 people and about 400 million in revenue when I left. And the company just got a little bit too big for me. And I just sort of felt like my heart was in the earlier stage. And so I just decided to leave. And we had an investor in common between Wayfair and Yesware, this guy Neeraj Agarwal at Battery Ventures, and so I got to know the Yesware team a little bit. And the founder of the company at the time felt as though they were starting to hit the wall, and they were trying to figure out some different ways to grow and compete in a market that had all of a sudden become incredibly well funded and very, very competitive. And so the thesis was to, for me to come in with a little bit of a different point of view and try to see if we could make some changes to get the business to be, growing faster, more profitably, et cetera. So I kind of went from a buyer of sales tech and,
Mm.
and an implementer of sales tech. So that was a big part of how we grew the Wayfair team, to a seller of sales tech. And, it was important to me to be able to stay in Boston for a bunch of different reasons. So I just, it's worked out.
Nice. What's kind of interesting is for a lot of smaller companies, it's like we can't afford to get the level of talent we need to grow to the next level. But there's a lot of Joels out there that are like, hey, my sweet spot is from 10 million to 50 million. Now I'm in a $500 million company. It's just not my bag. So,
Mm.
dear business owners, there's hope out there.
Yeah. I mean, I think on paper, my comp went down by a shocking amount when you consider the
Hence the
RSUs
hair
that I had
loss.
away.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah. So, but it's
But
it's
there's
only
joy,
money,
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So you come into this organization. How many people were in Yesware at that point when you joined them?
I think we were at 70 or 80, something like that.
Okay, so generally an organization either purposefully or just by default have a culture in place. And oftentimes the posters on the wall talking about the culture and what the real culture is, there's a delta between the two.
Hmm.
So when you came in, what did you see and what did you want to modify to, make this just a more effective organization?
Yeah, we in the Matthew, the founder, would tell you this if you asked him this. But one of the objectives of the company early on was to make it what we had said the best place anywhere anyone had ever worked.
Nice.
And as a result of that, the company invested in what I consider to be a pretty lavish set of benefits. We had, there's a lot of the .com or a lot of the,
Mm,
traditional, venture-backed SaaS. So we have masseuses come in. We had everybody in the company could get an executive coach, even if, you're sort of an entry-level employee. We had unlimited vacation. We had all the
mm,
things. And, I think part of the idea behind that, which I think was a good idea, was that the talent market was very crowded, and if you want to get the best talent, you should try to create the best conditions, such that talent will want to come and stay at your company. I mean, we weren't necessarily able to pay at the top of the range, especially when you consider what the FANG companies were paying developers, etc. So that was the idea, and I think what ended up happening was there's a yin and a yang to everything,
mm.
and the downside of that was I think we were a little bit soft as a culture, and we were a lot of really nice people there, and so I think we weren't always as honest with each other as we probably could have been, maybe not quite as demanding for results, and we just had to tighten things up a little bit, and unfortunately a lot of that ended up having to happen because we had to change, we had to do a headcount reduction, and then I think everybody realized the sort of the gravity of the situation, and why some things had to change, but that was tough, and I don't, in retrospect, I'm not even sure that I did a good enough job with that.
What's kind of interesting is, our mothers all said, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. And it kind of, politeness was a really good tool for elementary school, but politeness kills profits because it gets in the way of people really coming together and solving problems really quickly and moving on, as opposed to doing that. So let's turn to a new company using Yesware as a possible solution to move forward. So if you were advising, let's say, a tech company to bring in Yesware, one of the things they're probably going to do is go to Sales Navigator and get a good sense of who their target audience is, and they get that
Mhm.
list. So Joel, walk me through an ideal way to get that target list and then start using Yesware effectively to open up conversations with potential customers.
Yeah, I mean, typically you would devise some sort of an outbound campaign, and that and our research suggests that the best outbound campaigns have 7 to 8 touches over
Mm,
14 days across different media, so whether it's LinkedIn touch or email or phone calls. So that's we would probably say start with the thing that we that works in aggregate, and your mileage may vary, but it's sort of a good place to start. And then make sure that as you're constructing that campaign, that you're doing it in such a way that you're giving reps the ability to personalize, and you're giving them the space to actually then execute that personalization. And so if you are building a list from Sales Navigator, you should know some things about the person, and you should have a point of view about how your product or service is going to help that company, and that ought to come through right away. And the person that's receiving that first email ought to know that it was sent by somebody that cares about them and has done some work versus just a random blast. And
right.
if you can do that, then and then you seed that across multiple members of a team, you then start to introduce some variations to that, and you can then start to see which variations do better than other variations. And so you might find that, well, actually, it's way better when we send the white paper second versus first, or these subject lines tend to work better, or this length of email tends to perform. I mean, there's infinite permutations of these things, but that test and learn culture is critical. And then as the is sort of the winning variants, if you will, are found, then you want to make sure that those get shared across the team. And that's a way you can start to find that repeatable, scalable motion.
Mm.
And once you have that, then hopefully you've got an ability to put more leads into the top of the funnel via other means, or hire more reps, etc.
Yeah, I love that. And I think oftentimes salespeople tend to be mavericks, and process is so critical to figure out what's working, what isn't working. That test and learn thing only happens when people are using the same set of steps, so you can figure out which step goes where. So brilliant there. So I noticed as we were about to go online, I kind of reached out on LinkedIn and connected with you, and we had two gentlemen in common. One was Steve Richard. Is that someone you know?
Yeah, Steve is in the industry, and I believe I met Steve at a what was a conference, American Association of Inside Sales Professionals or something, many
Yeah.
many years ago. And so I wouldn't say we've kept in touch
But
necessarily, but I do know and remember Steve.
so Steve is a good guy and a great person that believes in the power of the telephone. That you can
Hmm.
reach anybody and have a good conversation. So I had him come to one of my conferences, and he's on stage and teaching how to do it. Then he goes to the audience. Is there somebody trying to get a hold of someone right now that I could help with? And someone goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Who's the name? What's the name of the person? And what's his phone number?" And he says, "Oh, by the way, what business are you in?" And just with those few facts, gets the person on the phone and has a meaningful conversation, sets an appointment. So really showing the power of the telephone
Hmm.
on stage, live under fire. So all of this email stuff is to get that conversation started. So where do you think that attempt at the phone call should be? Should it be at the beginning of this process, throughout? Where does the phone come in?
I think it depends a little bit on the market in which you're operating. For example, if you're in a business, if you're selling to small business,
Mm,
and particularly local small businesses that tend to answer their phone because that's part of the way that they get their
mm,
own, they manage their own business, then I would have heavy phone involvement still, and I would put that very early in the process. However, if you're trying to reach, a CIO or a CISO at a tech company, good luck ever getting that person on the phone.
right.
Honestly, like, it is going to be a real struggle. If you go lift their cell phone number off of Zoom info and you call them, like, you're probably going to get marked as spam, and
Mm,
that's going to probably hurt the next person that you try to call your deliver. But like, the defense mechanisms now are so much better on mobile versus what we had in the early days when we were trying to navigate switchboards and get through assistants and all. Like, it is a very different game in that sense. And so I would say that the less likely your person is to just answer the phone, I would say uh, the more structure you have to have up front to basically get a mutually agreed upon phone call, whether it's
mm.
like, hey, I'm going to call you at this time, or like, hey, let's jump on a Zoom, or whatever, I think is going to be the better long run strategy for those types. It can work, but as as now, it used to never be that if there was no way to mark somebody as spam 15 years ago, but now if you're calling cell phones, you're going to get marked as spam, and then you're going to get scam likely as soon as you pop up on somebody's phone, and like, you do not want that to happen.
Yeah, that would be a bad thing. So, a different landscape that we're dealing with. So, are you guys, because you probably have a large install base of customers, so you're seeing best practices. Are you seeing any of the strategies uh, change as time goes on in terms of getting success, or is this more of a just set up a campaign and then test and learn as you go? Have you gained any insights? I guess is a better way of asking that question.
Yeah, it does change. We put out a report. We haven't done one in since our acquisition, but we had one that we did, I think, in end of 2021, called um, I forget, it was sort of a long title, sales strategies there, or latest sales information that sales managers should know about or something. You could find it on our on the Yesware.com
Right.
website if you search our blog. But in there, we see about 1 billion email interactions a year, and so we chronicled, what subject lines are working, what times a day are working, what cadences are working, and it does always change. I think what ends up happening is people find a technique that works, and then people sort of pile into that technique, and
And
then
then
it
kill it.
stops working as
Yeah.
well. Yeah,
The
like the
golden
old
goose being killed. Yeah.
yeah, like the old, the old predictable revenue thing where you just email every VP in a company and say, who's the person I need to talk to about this? Like that did, I think it worked quite well for a while, but now it's, I think after every VP at every major company has gotten 5,000 of those emails, I think they start to go into the circular file. So it does change. I'm not sure. We should probably redo this, but my suspicion is that things are changing quite rapidly now as people embrace the large language models.
Mm.
And there's going to be a big change coming in April where Google is changing the rules of the game somewhat. Where if your company sends over 5,000 emails per day, they're putting some new restrictions in place. One is that you have to have one-click unsubscribe. Two is that you need to have sort of properly structured email headers. There's sort of a technical email
Mm.
thing. And then the last thing is if more than 0.3% of your emails get marked as spam, then they put you in deliverability jail.
Right.
So the stakes are going up quite a bit. So I think that is going to be like somebody should look at it in the June and see how things have changed then, because I think that this is likely to be quite a major change to behavior. I mean, I think they've always been doing it in the background with their automated spam filtering and stuff, but this is sort of the first big announced change in a while.
So, Joel, you have a podcast as well. What's the name of the podcast?
It's called The Hard Sell.
And what brought about that name?
It's sort of a jokey name. My kids make fun of it to no end, but the general idea is it's hard selling doesn't work, but selling is hard, and so let's try to
Mm.
bring people that really understand sales and sales technology to talk about interesting topics and what's working and what's not working.
So, who's a guest that comes to mind that was a standout episode?
We had so many. One that comes to mind that I think was quite good. We had Matt Bloomberg, who is the founder of Return Path,
Mm.
and is now founder of a company called Bolster that does fractional sort of executive placement and board placement work for tech companies. And we talked a lot about how the early sales evolves in a company, and he has this analogy, like you start with whiteboard selling and the founder does that, and then eventually you get to PowerPoint selling where maybe your first sales
Mm.
hire does that, or someone of the founder, but then eventually you got to get to PDF selling where it's like you pretty much know the playbook, you get it out there and you start to sell. I think that was a good analogy, and I found that to be quite true.
One of the things that one of the presentations I saw, I forget the name of the person that did it. It was very much how to use just one sheet of paper and graphically communicate what you're doing. And the example he gave was maybe 7 years ago or 8 years ago, and I could still recreate it today after seeing it just once. And it was just always like, wow, that's a pretty powerful technique. But that's one-on-one, sitting together with a buyer. And that seems to be the one of the hardest things to do in this really busy age is to get someone to give you their time and attention on a Zoom or in person. So if you were thinking of 5 critical things that people should keep in mind when they're trying to get that one-on-one appointment, what would they be, Joe? What would number 1 be, something they need to keep in mind?
Well, I think number 1 is make sure that the message you're sending is not going to be confused for someone that has not human sending it.
Right.
I think that's another. It's like make sure you stand out in your communications. It's really not that hard, because I mean I get hundreds of them, and I really don't get that many that are that people have put any thought into. So I think the first thing you could do is like put some actual thought into it. Number one. Number two is I'd say, generally keep it shorter. You're unlikely to get the War and Peace level email read on a first intro. Number three is be persistent. Our data suggests that if you don't get a reply within the first day, you've only got a 1 in 20 chance of ever getting a reply. So you gotta have some follow up as part of that. Number four, I'd say have appropriate targeting. So make sure that you're not spamming the universe. That the world's going to get more punitive towards people doing that. So make sure you've got a relevant audience that you can take the time to personalize to, and that you have a strong prior that they're gonna really benefit from it. And then I don't know. Last one is have fun with it. Like don't take it too personally when you get rejected, because you're going to get rejected a lot, and just keep going.
Superb. So there's video emails which are personalized. It's like, hey Joel, this is Umar. I thought da 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 da. And your thoughts on those compared to just written? Are they more effective, less effective?
Yeah, I think it's another one where when the Vidyards of the world first came out, they were quite effective because it was very novel. And I think as people started to adopt more and more of that, is like you start to get a lot of those, it maybe starts to feel a little bit less novel at that point. And I think part of the challenge I've seen with the implementation of those is a lot of the ones that I've received end up being ones like you've got the rep sitting there like, hey, Joel, and it writes your name on the whiteboard, like, oh, we should totally talk. And it's like, didn't really deliver, the core message about why it was interesting. And so I think that's an interesting medium to use, but I think you gotta be careful in how you use it, in using it appropriately. But I think there's something to that. I mean, that's one way you can sort of, indicate that you're not a machine.
For now,
you
at
get
least.
right. Yeah. We're clothed. I just saw some AI generated newscast with all the people were AI generated and all this. It's wild. So I think it's, it's something worth trying, and it may be that in your market it works well, but certainly an interesting tactic.
Somebody told me their first class of journalism school, this is more like a high school level actually, and the teacher gives here's a scenario that all the teachers have to go to Sacramento to present to a committee there about how education needs to be improved. This is happening on Thursday, and please write a headline about this event for the students. And of course they write, changing the state, changing education. And the guy says, actually, the headline should be school is closed on Thursday, because your constituents of students, they don't care about other stuff. It's just that. And bringing it back to our conversation, because you only have a few moments to grab the attention of the person reading the email. So the subject line has to be really powerful to get them to open it. And then you have to get to the point. So any example comes to mind of a particular email getting to the point really, really quickly that you went, these guys did a really good job?
Yeah, that we've had a few of those, and I think normally what I've seen is that, within that first, certainly above the fold, but in that first paragraph or something, there's something that says, and I think oftentimes the marketing people have an advantage in this because there's so much data you can get about somebody's website and interactions, but you could sometimes get something that says like, hey, we saw your natural search declined 20% last month, and we took a look and we think it's these three things. Like those are
That's
ones that,
powerful.
those are ones that can be, and I think there's only a handful of places where you could sort of have the information to get away with that strategy. But that's one. I mean, one book that I recommend to people, which it's quite a dry book actually, but it's called The Pyramid Principle by Barbara Minto, and it's a book that is basically given to every first year management consultant. I think the big three strategy firms, McKinsey and Bain and BCG, and it's a slog to get through that thing, but that is the best thing that I've ever seen about how to communicate clearly in business writing. And I think a lot of salespeople would benefit from a read through of that.
I have insomnia, so I'll put it on my list, and that might be
That'll
a
put you
chapter
right
fall
to
asleep.
sleep. Don't worry about it. Yeah.
So, Joel, thank you so much for a delightful conversation. I learned a lot, took a bunch of notes. Any last words, anything you want to share with the audience before we part company?
Yeah, I just say, we've got probably 10 plus years of data-driven sales content over at Yesware. So you can check it out at yesware.com/blog. It's all free. And if you want to check out the hard sell, yesware.com/podcast.
Brilliant. Joel, thanks for being on the show. Stay online with me as we say goodbye. Everyone, please subscribe to the podcast. And if you like this, send Joel an email. We'll have his contact information in the show notes. If you enjoyed this episode, please go to iTunes and leave a 5-star rating. And if you're looking for more tools, go to my website at nolimitselling.com. I've got a free mind training course there that's going to teach you some insights from the world of neuro-linguistic programming, and that is the fastest way to get better results.